Some of you are worried about the Packers having an alpha number one receiver, but is not having one actually the most prudent financial decision the Packers could possibly make?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The conversation around the Packers' alpha number one receiver has been framed around offensive efficiency. And we saw last year that the Packers' offensive efficiency did not wane in the face of these questions at receiver. And one of the big reasons is Jordan Love. He's getting $50+ million as a result of that success. And Matt LaFleur, well-deserved, an extension and recognition now as one of the best coaches in the league. You have those two things. You have something that is, it's not quite unique in the league, but it is a significant competitive advantage. Look at what the Kansas City Chiefs have been able to do post Tyreek Hill. Now, not everyone has Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not saying that the Packers can fully emulate that model, though if the defense takes a step, they may not have to, because the offense is really good and the defense could in fact also be really good. But Justin Jefferson just got paid the most money any receiver is getting in the league, and it's not close. He's getting the most money of any non-quarterback in the league. That one is close. $35 million a year. The Packers were ready to pay Devontae Adams at the top of the market. By the way, that was like $10 million APY ago. The receiver market has absolutely blown the top off these salaries. It is crazy what has happened in the receiver market. Jalen Waddle, who's a receiver 2, just got $28 million. That is going to be the conversation. T. Higgins is going to want 30. Maybe, just maybe, and I'm not saying this was intentional, but maybe the Packers are benefiting now from not having any one of those guys. Because if it is the case that the offense is sustainably good, that this group, if it just, takes the normal, hey, the year 2 guys get a little better, the year 3 guys get a little better, Jordan Love gets a little better, and Matt LaFleur has a little more experience and understanding, everyone just gets no jumps, just incrementally better. This is an elite offense. I've made the case before this offseason that this can be the best offense in the league. In fact, I predicted it would be. That is proof that you don't have to break the bank for any of these individual receivers, because none of them are the true drivers of what the offense is or its efficiency. Now, we saw, I made the case, Christian Watson is the guy that if he hits, this offense can be special. And I remain steadfast in that belief. But even if that's true, it's 1 year of productivity. He's got to get paid next year. He's going into 2025, the final year of his deal. Romeo Doubs is going into the final year of his deal. Can he get the James Jones 2011 offseason deal where he goes and hits free agency, the money's not there for him, and so he comes back on a reasonably priced deal for the Packers in 2011 to be part of one of the greatest collection of pass catchers the league has ever seen, and undoubtedly the greatest collection of pass catchers in Packers history. Now, whether this Packers team can rival that Packers team in terms of that talent, we have a long way to go before we get there. So let's like not get it twisted about what we're talking about here. But if they can play this egalitarian style where it's just like, okay, one game is a Dontavian Wicks game, the next game is a Jaden Reed game, you got a Luke Musgrave game, you could just a Jordan Love finding everybody game, a Romeo Doubs game here, a Christian Watson game here, a Josh Jacobs game here, a Tucker Kraft, a Luke Musgrave. They have the guys where that can be the case. We saw it happen last year. Justin Jefferson eating $35 million of the Minnesota Vikings cap APY. And that's, by the way, that's not going to happen for like 3 years anyway. But they can do that because they have a rookie contract quarterback. The Packers are about to definitively not have that. So maybe it is in fact the best thing for the Packers that none of these guys are going to expect to get paid at the top of the market. None of them have or are likely to produce like players who can demand that they get paid at the top of the market. None of them is going to do what T. Higgins has done in Kansas City, or in Cincinnati. Sheesh, don't clip that. It's just probably not going to happen because they just have too many guys. The offense is not built this way in Green Bay. It's built in Cincinnati to rely on the virtuosic talents. I guess 2 days in a row I've used that word on the show. Of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The Packers offense is not built that way. Now, either is the 49ers, but Christian McCaffrey is still going to get paid at the top of the market. George Kittle is a top of the market tight end. Brandon Ayuk wants to get paid at the top of the market. They paid Deebo Samuel at or near the top of the market when he got his contract. So guys are still going to want to get paid. The difference is, even in those cases, Deebo Samuel had a season where he had an outside chance at 2,000 yards. Brandon Ayuk has been one of the most productive receivers over the last 2 years in the NFL. The Packers don't have anyone like that. Romeo Doubs, a nice complimentary piece. And I can't figure out Romeo Doubs. Like, some of the underlying numbers are really ugly. They say he's one of the least efficient and productive receivers in football, but I watch him play and I'm like, that guy's useful. That's a good player. And I like him being on the Packers. But the question is another team going to say, well, that guy could be our wide receiver too, no doubt, be a 110 to 120 target guy for us, and say, how's $15 million a year? How's $18 million a year? That doesn't make sense for the Packers. And if that is the case, if the Packers think that's the case, then they might have to look at the trade deadline this year. Like, let's say Dontavian Wicks takes the step that we all think he's capable of making, and Christian Watson does stay healthy, and Jaden Reed remains the superstar in the making that he showed flashes of last year. Wicks, Watson, Reed is a pretty tantalizing core. They fit together well. They complement one another. I could see the Packers going, well, not going to pay him, so maybe deal him now when there's a year left on this contract. Now maybe a team's going to say, well, he's going to want a new contract now, so next trade deadline is the time to make this deal. And he becomes like the Kendrick Bourne, the Mohamed Sanu at the deadline, when it's like, okay, you got a guy, and so here, move on. But the Packers also are in the same position that the Bengals are with T. Higgins, in that they're chasing a title. So how asset hungry do you want to be when Romeo Doubs clearly helps you win football games? Now, that's a little bit of a tangent, but in the medium term, it's going to save the Packers some money that none of these guys are a Devontae Adams level player. And the fact that the offense doesn't seem to need that kind of player makes that okay. Like, if you're an offense that's struggling, like if you look at the Cowboys offense, if CeeDee Lamb is not being productive, it's a problem. The Vikings last year, without Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, even with backup quarterbacks, they found ways to be productive. The Bengals, without Joe Burrow, we're going to talk about that in a second, they found ways to be productive. The Packers have found ways to be productive without that top line receiver. And it could be from a team building standpoint. After hitting on Jordan Love, hitting on this group of receivers in an offense that does not demand one guy get 150 targets, it could end up being one of the best things to happen to this team from a team building standpoint, frankly, in the Brian Gutekunst era, just from a savings and per dollar value standpoint. And I know that is a cold way of thinking about it in some ways, but it's really beneficial to the way that they're going to have to build this team with Jordan Love set to make what could be a record-setting amount of money. Now, I want to continue this discussion about Jordan Love because some people are afraid of regression. We've talked about that. I don't want to talk about regression. The thing to be afraid of is not regression. It's injury. That's next. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. You still have time if you live in the Boston area or you want to make plans to go to the NBA Finals. It's still like 14 days away. No, it's not really. But it seems like it's going to be weeks before the NBA Finals actually kicks off. But that gives you some time to go get the best deals. And the best deals, I'm telling you, they are at Game Time. Last minute tickets, we're getting to it. Game Time has them. Easy to find and buy Major League Baseball tickets or any kind of event in your area. They have views from the seats, so you know what you're getting before you even show up to the venue. There's nothing worse than buying seats that you think are killer seats. You got a good deal and you show up and you're like, what is this? Nope. You know what you're getting when you hit buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, whether it's the NBA Finals, whether it's Major League Baseball, whether you're doing your work ahead of time, you're doing your homework on Packers tickets this upcoming season. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Let's talk about Jordan Love. Before we do, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. It's not regression you should be afraid of with Jordan Love. It's injury. And I don't mean a broken collarbone. Because, of course, that would negatively impact the season if he broke his collarbone, like Aaron Rodgers did twice. Not a dig at Aaron Rodgers. That's just a thing that happened. But when I went back and rewatched some of the quarterbacks from this last season, dug into some of the numbers, as I was, doing our prep for yesterday's show on the pyramid here, it stuck out to me. Okay, Joe Burrow, he gets hurt. Justin Herbert, he's playing hurt. Jalen Hurts, he's playing hurt. Dak Prescott last year, playing hurt. Josh Allen for part of this year, playing hurt. Matthew Stafford last year, playing hurt. This happened this past season. Matthew Stafford missed some time. Lamar Jackson, over the course of his career, missed time. And not every quarterback can play hurt. It clearly affected Jalen Hurts on designed runs especially. If you are the kind of quarterback that relies on your running ability, Russell Wilson, later in his career, when he can't extend plays, when he can't be a magician, his productivity fell off a cliff because he is not a 1-2-3 rhythm passer. And it affected, even in those MVP seasons, there were times in big moments where Aaron Rodgers was sort of the last one to realize he does not have the escapability that he once had. That it used to be the case that in almost any circumstance, he could slither away evade pressure, outrun a defensive end to the corner, and he just couldn't do it anymore. And it impacted his ability to make plays outside of the pocket where he was, and I still think remains, the most dynamic, explosive quarterback we have ever seen breaking the pocket. Certainly as a thrower. Patrick Mahomes, I think, is the only guy in that discussion. But Rodgers, even the level of throws that he could make, his ability to big game hunt on the run, I don't know that we'll ever see anything like it again, or it'll be a long time. Mahomes is incredible doing a lot of different things. He's great improv. He's great breaking the pocket too, but it's just a different level of skill. It's like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry are like the two greatest shooters ever, and Steph Curry is a significantly better and more skilled shooter than Klay Thompson because of the degrees of difficulty. Like, that's sort of what we're talking about. If you lose that, like Dak Prescott coming off the injury a couple years ago, it looked like it affected him, knowing I don't know if I can move the way that I want to. Now, Jordan Love last year, there were some times when he was a little banged up, but he consistently played on time and in rhythm. And if he moved, it was a little move in the pocket here, a subtle move. It was a pump. It was one step. It was a slide. The second half, he was unbelievable manipulating the pocket, did not break it to scramble hardly at all. Hardly at all. Was always looking to run, but didn't really have to because he was seeing the game so cleanly. If you want to be optimistic, that's what you point to. Because not every quarterback can be productive when they are hurt. Joe Burrow, clearly, to start the season, dealing with that injury, just couldn't be productive. Just couldn't do it. We saw Aaron Rodgers, 2014 MVP season, playing on one leg the second half of the season and found ways to be productive. He managed it because he can torque his body and do things that most players just can't do. Patrick Mahomes has proven he can play hurt. Justin Herbert, broken ribs, and he can still fire balls wherever he wants. Some guys can do it. Matthew Stafford, he can do it. Other guys can't. Other guys can't. And I think the fact that Jordan Love has this ability to make off-platform throws, to make no-footed throws. I mean, I think often of the throw when we're talking about these discussions, the throw against the Vikings, down the seam to Jaden Reed, where his feet are not even close to set, and he has to torque his body, his hips flip, his legs flip. It's an incredible display of biomechanics. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. There aren't many guys in the league who, from the position where he decides to throw it, could have made that throw. Just not. The way his body moves is special. And so that would give you the confidence to say, well, in a situation like that, he could do it, but we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it. And over the course of a career, there are just going to be too many times when you twist an ankle the wrong way, or someone lands on your knee, or something happens and you've got to gut it out. We haven't seen that yet from Jordan Love. We don't know what that looks like. We've seen the high-level play. We've seen him be and play for stretches like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, like a top 5 quarterback, like a top 3 quarterback in the second half of the season. I will continue to say he was the best quarterback in the league. This is a new challenge for him. We don't know when he'll face it. Like Brett Favre was an Iron Man, but he was hurt a lot. He just found a way to play through it. Sometimes with aplomb and sometimes not. Aaron Rodgers, same thing. And he had more serious injuries. He tore his ACL in college, collarbone, broke his leg in the league, broke his collarbone twice, tibial plateau fracture, played an entire season on that. Well, he always looked good in 2018. Now you add in the body language stuff, you add in the unproven receivers, you add in the Mike McCarthy of it all. Like, there's reasons for it. But that's one of the big questions for Jordan Love now. It's one of the only questions, frankly, that he has to answer. Because we know in big moments he can come through. We know in less than ideal circumstances he can be productive. We know that for stretches he can look like one of the best players at his position in the league. We know that. We know the ceiling is incredibly high. What we don't know is this. And so that's a question he's going to have to answer. Speaking of things we don't know, it may be the case that the biggest moves of the last 3 years for Brian Gutekunst are the ones he didn't make. I want to revisit this next. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Right now, the Dallas Mavericks, one of the biggest underdogs. If they win, they'd be one of the biggest underdogs to win in recent NBA history. Plus 180 to win. That's good stuff. That is good. That's good stuff. And I'm excited to see this series, and I'm excited to get good odds doing it. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. The best player in the series tends to win, but the Celtics have the best team. How do you square that? I think the answer is you bet it game by game. That's probably what I'll do. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Sometimes it's the moves you don't make. But Locked On is making moves. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app, Locked On Sports Today. Here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Can you tell me, don't look, can you tell me off the top of your head what team Chase Claypool plays for currently, right now, today? Give up. The answer is the Buffalo Bills. Did you know that? You probably did not. The Chicago Bears outbid the Packers for Chase Claypool, as you may recall, a second-round pick. And reportedly, the Steelers took the Bears' offer for a second-round pick over the Packers' offer for a second-round pick because they thought the Bears would be worse. They were right, and the Bears ended up trading the 33rd overall pick. And it ended up being, I think, actually the 32nd overall pick. But it was the #1 second-round pick because the Bears were the worst team in the league that year. Tough look that the Packers were willing to do that same trade. And Tom Silverstein reported that the Packers had a deal essentially done at that trade deadline before they went on in Claypool to get Darren Waller. It was the second time they nearly traded for Darren Waller. Darren Waller played for the Giants last year, was not particularly productive, not particularly healthy, as has been the case for his entire career. Now, looks like he is going to be retired by Kelsey Plum, hopefully not going into music videos. The Packers were going to give up real meaningful capital for two players who would have been net negatives for them. The Bears moved on. Chase Claypool goes to the Dolphins. They move on, despite the fact that they don't have any other receivers that have a similar body type or skill set that Chase Claypool has, such that you think Chase Claypool has a skill set at this point. This could have had reverberations down the line. Think of the 2023 draft that the Packers had, giving up what would have been precious commodities. Maybe you don't end up with Luke Musgrave. Maybe you don't end up with Jaden Reed, or get to trade down multiple times and end up with Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Carl Brooks. Think of the butterfly effect of those non-moves. We point often to the moves that aren't made as negatives. Oh, they didn't do anything. When was the last time a move in the middle of the season actually swung the title? I think you can make the case that the Von Miller trade for the Rams and then the addition of OBJ helps win the title. More often than not, though, it doesn't go that way. And yes, the Rams would do it 20 times out of 10 because they won the title. But if Bukowski Tart just catches an interception, a punt of an interception, it's all for naught. And then the Buffalo Bills go all in and sign Von Miller to a high-end deal in free agency, and he's a non-entity for them. We get so caught up in the moves that the Packers don't make. And I get it because they're always involved in the discussions. I think if Packer fans would have their druthers, they would say, look, if you're not going to do anything, just shut up. We don't want your name in every discussion, because then when you don't do anything, it feels like you didn't do anything when actually it was the smart thing to not do anything. I remember being on this show going, if the Packers aren't willing to go above a fourth and the Texans want a second for Will Fuller, can't they just meet in the middle? And it turned out that the Texans being willing to come off their asking price and the Packers not being willing to come off their offer price ended up being the best thing for the Packers, because Will Fuller has not been an NFL player since then. I mean, almost literally. So I understand the frustration from fans when these things don't happen, because the Packers are in every conversation. Brian Gutekunst said they would be, and it is true that they are. And we've heard from people like Andrew Brandt on this show, on his platforms as well, that the Packers have for years been used as leverage. You leak, oh, the Packers are interested. And Brian Gutekunst has sort of fanned the flames here, because he said we want to be in on every conversation. They make calls. Brian Gutekunst says as much. No, we called, we looked into some things, we had some ideas, we were going to do some stuff. Didn't quite fall into place. Yeah, because the Packers set hard targets for themselves. We're not going above this number. And it's gonna hurt them with some fans. Like the Aaron Jones thing, they decided he's just like not worth it at almost any price. Jordy Nelson, he's just not worth it at almost any price. They just made Micah Hyde, just not worth it at almost any price. It hurts them in some cases too, but don't miss these circumstances where it helps. And sometimes you got to get lucky. You got to get lucky that the Bears were also desperate to learn about Justin Fields for whatever reason, and were desperate enough to give up a second for Chase Claypool. And that the Bears, per usual, suck. And everyone knows that. And the Packers, I mean, in a literal way, got to use that to their advantage, because it gave the Bears that player. He didn't go to Green Bay. And I don't think we can say like, oh, he would have been better in Green Bay. No, I don't think he would have been. I just don't think he's a useful NFL player. I think if he were, we'd have seen it by now, other than that one season. And multiple franchises in the last year giving up on him does not signal something there. Well, it signals some things, but not a quality NFL player. All right, back tomorrow. Much more as we move through the offseason here on Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, all the social medias, Instagram, TikTok. We are there with clips and memes and the fun stuff. And of course, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Wherever you get podcasts. Or on YouTube. Some people just have it playing in the background. I can't do that. I want to, if I'm watching it, I want to watch it. And then it's like, well, then why don't I listen to it and do other things? That's how I feel about it. But you guys are watching it, and that's great. I love that you watch it. Go watch it on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.